Because I know for a fact that I could fall in love with you, and so far have seen with some pretty crystal clarity that my capacity to love has just gone up and up and up. Not always consistently. There's been some pretty major dips, but was I able to love more deeply and more fully and more frequently at 25 than 15? Oh yeah, no question. Was I able to love more fully and more frequently and more deeply at 35 than 25? No. But that's because at 30 I loved way more deeply than I ever had. And at 35 I was still recovering. But I would say indications are pretty strong that I can not only love you and still love everyone else in the community, and those two things just feed on each other, but that I could probably, and that I could almost certainly fall in love with you. But the indications in my mind are that there's a 10% or maybe far less chance that I'm just too damaged from having fallen so madly in love before, and from it having happened so late in life. I think those first really deep crushes are meant to happen to the 15, to the 13, to the 10, to the 20-year-old mind. Not the 30-year-old mind like it did for me. I was 28, 29. Oh, wow. I'm not sure I understand the timeline now. I'm 39 now. No, I met her at 28 and about 29. Fell in love with her at 29. Yeah. Okay, this kind of stuff is always really boring, sorry. So, in sum, can definitely love you a lot. Can definitely love you long time. Can very highly probably fall in love with you. And if the overarching pattern is any indication. See, the only thing I've never learned how to mash up together and do it, it's all, have you ever thought like, okay, I've learned this, I've learned that, I've learned this. Now it's just time to put it together. It's just, all I need to do is just put it together. Do you ever feel like you've got all these aspects of yourself? You've got this part, you've got that part, you learn these lessons here, you learn those lessons there, you've got this philosophy, that philosophy, you've read this person, you've read that person, you've listened to this person, you've listened to that person, you've learned here, you've learned there. And there's plenty of mutual contradiction, and that's why you can't yet seem to put it together. But do you ever feel like you're just right on the edge of wisdom? You're just right on the edge of having a goddamn clue. You're just almost there. You can almost taste it. You can almost see a picture. You can almost see the path, see the forest, see what life is made of, see how to navigate, have enough, just a crisp enough vision, that you can do what a beetle does, that you can do what a rat does with whatever their vision is, however fuzzy the vision of a primitive nematodic little, some weird proto-salamander thing with just a concavity of photosensitive cells that can kind of see a shadow and maybe which direction it is. And it gets by. It has a map of the world that fills its needs. It navigates fine. I've never been in love and poly. I've been poly and loved a lot. I've been in love and thought, I could do poly with this. But I have so far in those two scenarios failed in the actual practice. I failed to take a poly attitude when the chips really hit the fan. When I was in love. I took things way too personally. I thought about my capacity to be poly with her in the abstract in the future. And when later I was in a poly relationship that was very explicitly poly and we both practiced polyamory, I didn't demonstrate a capacity to let go and fall in love. I was still holding back. I was still very confused. In fact, I also was very unskilled at being poly even with her. I think maybe in a connected way, because I wasn't living very open-heartedly. Oh, who has this whole philosophy about living open-hearted? Is it Brene Brown? Wholehearted living? I think that's her. Oh, I think you would like that. Even though I wasn't allowing myself to fall in love with her, and even though we came very close, there was even a time when we were just having a great convo, really connecting, a meeting of the minds. We looked each other in the eyes, and I could feel it starting to wash over me. I could feel her face melting into that perfection. Cherish that. We didn't let it. Oh, we were so vulnerable with each other. And I think in my brain I made up for not being able to fall in love with her by, I suppose, not being willing. It's maybe a little better. By being effectively emotionally monogamous with her. Like, I just didn't feel attractive. I just wouldn't let myself meet other women, not really. I would date other women occasionally, but it never felt right. Also because I had all these tribal fantasies, and like, we were a triad for a while and then we lost the one. So after she left and it became clear that they really didn't have any allegiance to each other at all, it just started making me realize that I had fucked up. I wasn't really forming a tribe. It was more like a baby cult of personality. And God, you gotta find people who are already on the same page. You can't try and get people onto the tribal page. Or maybe you can, but they really need to get into it. And I just don't know, you know? So much better to form a tribe of people that are already community-minded than to imagine that people who are willing to glom onto you are ever going to be willing to glom onto each other. And I think that's how all the cultishness of the 60s and 70s communes movement got started. It always ended up being a cult of personality because it was literally just too rare for people to think like this. And they should have desperately found each other instead and duked it out over their differing visions instead of finding acolytes, you know, subjects, People willing to surround them, buy into their bullshit because they sensed that grain of deep truth, the community mindedness. So yeah, there have definitely been steps in the opposite direction. The overall trajectory of my life with regards to people. Because I'm not totally just oriented toward women. I don't think anyone's the Kinsey 0 or the Kinsey 6. I just think that's bullshit. We could talk about that later, but I just think that human brains are too modular and also not modular enough. And I don't think we separate the sexy feelings and the lovey feelings and the amorousness and the eros. And it's just not all as compartmentalized as all of that. I'm going to say something really crazy, but I really think we're even going to discover that part of the fuel for the fire for our deep love of children is mixed up with a little bit of eros, and that's okay. It doesn't mean you should do anything like that. It just means that it's okay if that is mixed up in what fuels your fire of love for children. You don't need to avoid contact with the young to the point where it never, ever, ever triggers any of your erotic feelings. You're more just your mixed up love, just your love. I think you would be, to avoid, I don't know, I'm just like picturing a father who stops almost all physical contact with his little girls as soon as they hit 10 or 12, and I just think that's tragic. And yet, utterly common now. There's hardly a 15-year-old girl in the world who can still snuggle with dad. In the first world, anyway. Maybe in the third world, they actually have better boundaries. Ironically, because there's obviously some things that we're doing a little better here in the first world, but there's also plenty we could learn from third worlders. Mostly because they're not as far removed from tribalism yet. So yeah, if my overall pattern is any indication, I have fallen harder and harder each time. Each new set of experiences is like, until finally it was just like, holy shit, if this is what being in love is, I don't think I've ever been in love. So yeah, putting it all together. Connecting all of the bits and pieces. The eros and the philos and the agape. Loving the community. Loving like a puppy. Helping care for the young. Helping care for the elderly. Helping enable the elderly to continue to care for themselves for as long as humanly possible. I don't like this whole attitude of treating them like children. That's wrong. Even children, the rule of thumb is, don't do anything for anyone that they could possibly do for themselves. But yeah, sharing you and yet wanting all of you. Sharing all of myself, sharing so much of myself, if not 100%, if still holding back some of the, I don't plan on sharing every toxic little bit with everyone. I think I've learned that there is maybe one or two authentic definitions of real masculinity. and I don't know about women, but I do think that men, maybe this is common, maybe this should be women too, I don't know. I'll just speak for myself. As a man, there are parts of me I don't plan on sharing. Because, you know, there are toxic parts that loved ones should never be exposed to. Like, it is okay to hold some of ourselves back. I think we talked about that. That's where the radical honesty thing, it kind of breaks down. You don't have to share every piece with everyone. You don't have to share everyone can be a psychopath. Every single one of us might have been a perfectly viable SS officer. So much of it is just grooming. And if you think it's impossible that you would have made any kind of Nazi, even just one of the passive ones that kind of went along and privately thought it was nonsense, craziness, immoral, horrendous, wrong, evil. If you are so sure you would have just stood up and become the next Schindler, I just don't think you're being honest with yourself. And so the question becomes, do we need to share all of those parts of ourselves with each other in order to be fully sharing? No. I think everyone has the capacity within them to be a total fucking psycho. Doesn't mean you should share it. We are going to have to learn how to accept folks like me who tend to have a perpetual openness, an infinite childhood, a little too much neoteny, are going to have to end up accepting that development means developing certain things and not others. You don't want to develop your whole self. You don't want to find your whole self. Because remember, you have the capacity to be a fucking Nazi. Those weren't a different species. So yeah, sharing very much of myself. Sharing deeply. And yet still sharing it with others and letting it go into what I call the money multiplier. You invest some love over here, and then spend some returns over there, and then circulate it all around until you've created a situation with not the unlimited wants and limited means taught in standard economics, but instead a situation like the title of this book I recommend all the time that reverses that. Limited wants, unlimited means. The book is a reader on hunter-gatherer economics. But this, I hope, is a primer on transactive love. And how to make it an economy of abundance.